Okay, we're live. All right. Hey, everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to, well, first off, thank you for spending your time with us. This is the Good Questions, Bad Answers Facebook live / YouTube / podcast. So if you're watching us live this evening, we appreciate you spending your time with us. If you're watching or listening to us in the future, we appreciate that too. If you get something out of this and you want to follow us, be sure to subscribe so you can be sure to keep abreast of everything that we do, because all we do is nothing but cool stuff. I'm totally lying here, but my name is Joshua Jack. My co-host is
Tim Izzo.
And tonight we have an awesome show, or an episode. At least I hope. I think it's going to be an awesome episode. I have a good friend of mine from middle school. I've known him quite a while. James Byers. He has this amazing bio that he wrote out, but it would take me like 30 minutes to read it because
it take you 30 seconds. Come on, don't be lazy.
I can't even paraphrase it, but I do want to hit the highlights. He was born way back in the 70s. No, okay, but seriously, he was born back in the 70s. He grew up with me throughout the 80s. He grew up in a little town called Milton, Florida, which is right outside Pensacola, in the Panhandle of Florida. For those of you that aren't interested, he has his bachelor's degree. What was your wait? It's here.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, so he went to Tallahassee, got a bachelor's degree in finance from FSU, and then he became a law enforcement officer at Okaloosa County, where he did Walton County. Excuse me. Sorry. You went to Okaloosa-Walton College, which was where the law enforcement academy was. I'm reading this, by the way, off my second screen, so forgive me. I'm actually paraphrasing. I'm trying to get through all the BS to get to the real meat of what he wrote. It's, I might include his bio. Actually, I am. I'm going to include his bio in the show notes. So if you want to read it for yourself, you can read it for yourself.
Well worth the time.
It is well worth the time. But he did 4 years as a sheriff's deputy, including the last year he was an undercover narcotics investigator. So hide your weed. And then from there, he went on to Pensacola Police Department, where he worked there for 2 years. And then he transitioned to Atlanta for a little bit. And what happened there? You had to find a new job because your wife didn't want you to be a police officer in Atlanta.
Yeah, they get shot too much.
Right. And so then you became a substitute teacher?
Right, and then a paraprofessional, and then a teacher.
What is a paraprofessional?
What we used to call teacher aides back in the 80s.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, big titles now.
Yeah.
They're not quite professionals. They're para.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, we won't get into that because I'm sure
it's kind of derogatory.
Yeah. I don't want to be mean. So, and then you became a teacher, and then you moved back to Pensacola, and then you worked for the state as a financial investigator.
Correct.
And then you got kicked to the curb because the governor did not like you personally.
We're the other 12 people in the office.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you did, but you were the 13th one, and they were like, "Yeah, we got to get rid of it." So, but all joking aside, you spent several years as a law enforcement officer. Then you became a teacher, and you spent some time in a middle school, right? Teaching
Correct.
Middle school, and then you went to a high school, and now you're back to teaching middle school again. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right. So all that to say this, yeah, I know that was challenging.
It's been a lot easier just to read it.
Yeah,
that's
probably
one
would.
Heck of a life experience story right there. That's a lot.
It's not, I'm only 40.
And thank you for putting your life on the line as an officer. I appreciate that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So, that was the interesting. That was why I wanted to get you on the show. It was because I wanted to talk about societal changes, and I wanted to get your take as a law enforcement officer and as an educator in the schools, and what you see, what your thoughts are, and yeah, I mean, see where we go with it. So, what are your thoughts?
Awfully broad, but okay. Okay, so I started in law enforcement in 2002. and it was more of a rural area. So it was a lot different. Working in a rural area, people are a bit more respectful of law enforcement than urban areas. My wife was a teacher in the area as well, which made it difficult when I'd arrest somebody. Hey, Miss Byers, your husband arrested my daddy for meth last night. So that made life a little difficult. But all in all,
or village.
Yeah, no, it was a good experience. When we moved to Pensacola, being a more urban environment, it had the more anti-police, anti-law enforcement feel.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing that made me make the switch to education was being in one of our projects in Pensacola one evening, and a very small child come running up to me. I was walking through the projects, strolling on foot, and gave me a hug.
Oh.
And it just made my day.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 12 or 13-year-old brother came over and scolded the kid and said, "Get away from that pig. We don't talk to the cops."
Mm-hmm.
And it broke my heart. And that was the reason I kind of wanted to get into education. I wanted to, instead of putting kids in jail, I wanted to be able to change their lives before they got put in jail.
That's awesome.
Now you bring up an interesting point. Why now? You're patrolling in the projects, and why do you think there's such a hard? Why is it so hard to build relationships in the community?
I think a lot of it. I'm not going to place the blame all on the citizens. I do place some blame with the police department. There are still old school officers that don't build relationships with the community and community members, and they don't talk to people in a relationship building manner.
Right.
I can count on my hand in the. I worked also part time with the department while I was teaching for another 5 or 6 years, and so I kind of count a total of 10 years in law enforcement, part time and full time. But I can count in those 10 years how many times I had to go full hands on somebody on one hand.
Right.
And I attribute that to relationships and talking to people like they're people.
Right.
There is still, though, regardless, there is still part of the population that have an inherent distrust of law enforcement. It doesn't matter, and it's just passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
Until they step up and do something about that, I don't know that anything will change.
See, and you bring up an interesting point, and I just kind of want to reiterate, I think in life, no matter what you do, because I've been in law enforcement too, there's going to be 20% of the population that are going to love you regardless of what you do.
That's right.
Unless you do something really dumb, but for the most part, they're going to love you. They're going to love your organization. They're going to love everything about your culture. And then on the other hand, you got 20% that no matter what you do, you could save their life, you could save their mother, you do bend over backwards, help them out, and they're not going to like you regardless. And then in the middle, you have the 60% that's swayable, and those are the people that, depending on your actions and what their interactions are with that agency or organization, they're going to walk away one way or another. And I think that's where we have a problem in society. And then also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the tempo of police work has changed. And it's changed from having time to build these relationships. Now, don't get me wrong, on a slow night, slow night's a slow night, but anymore with less people getting in law enforcement and calls coming and coming and coming and coming. And what I mean by call people is a police officer getting a 911 call response that they have to go respond to, that they don't have time to build these relationships. And I think that's kind of a travesty too, because it's a tough job. I mean, what do you think?
I think also a large part of that is the recruitment effort is due to salary. You're taking somebody. Why would somebody go out and make $30,000 a year, like myself, with a college degree, when even though that's still what I make in education, go do something with a degree in finance, do something much more profitable? I'm not getting yelled at every day. I'm not getting shot at. I'm not getting beat up. Why would somebody choose that for $30,000 a year? Mm-hmm. And that is the big struggle in law enforcement, is finding qualified people that are willing to work for low pay in a high stress environment.
That is a challenge.
Difficult. Yeah.
There was another thought that I was having is, what are your thoughts as far as, this is something I came across, like, a lot of people are getting back from the military. I was in the Marine Corps, we in that type of mentality of being a warrior, right? We're suiting up, we're going to go fight. And, and I've been a part of different, organizations in the past where, like you said, there's that 10% or there's a portion within the law enforcement community that's how they view law enforcement, as it's a fight, it's a war,
Right.
and then, but in the reality of it, I think that where we tend, or where the community seems to fail, is it really needs to be more of a guardian mindset.
Absolutely.
And now, do you think, and this kind of goes along with, teaching nowadays, like back in the day, police officers had a ton of personal discretion. So did teachers. Now, as we move into today, we don't have that. It seems to me, like, here again, I'm far removed from teaching, and I'm actually far removed from local policing nowadays. But in my education and in my experience and the things I've read and learned about, it seems like that's another issue, is just personal discretion, trusting your officers, trusting your teachers what to do best. And it seems like we're in a very risk adverse, and we don't use those as learning lessons. We use those to, hurt people, not hurt people, but, people that mess up, instead of, hey, you messed up, this is where you learn, this is how you get over it. Does that make sense?
And I would agree to an extent. I think it's like any organization. It depends on who your superiors are. I think that we've all had bosses that were micromanagers versus those that let us do our job because they knew we were competent in what we did. I've had both in law enforcement and in education. Those that I had a sergeant, for example, in Walton County, that after I wrote an arrest report, he was a retired Air Force sergeant, and Byers, come here, we need to talk. So I sat down with him, and he proceeded to tell me everything that was wrong. And then I broke out the statute book, and I said, Sarge, no, here's the statute. And I read it word verbatim. But he was old school and said that the statute book was wrong. So
now, I have come across that myself. Is you get people in certain positions that they're afraid to do. Well, they don't know the job, or they haven't. Well, like a doctor, right? I mean, they, and nurses and everything like that, they go to, they have certain CEUs or credit. They have to go through class. They have to go through training every year to stay up to date. And actually, law enforcement officers do too. But the older you get, I think, longer in the tooth that they become,
that's right,
the less that they do it. And I've had supervisors myself.
What I was taught in school 30 years ago is still right.
Right, and it's still the same way. And I'm not going to change of it. It was good enough for them. It was good enough for me. It's good enough for you. By the way,
on the education side, what's changed is not so much the supervisory role from the district or even the school level, but it's more of the state and federal government reaching their hands in and telling teachers what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And that's very frustrating. For example, and this may not be current. In fact, it was under the last governor, not our current governor, but the last governor, his board of education. Yeah, I see your disclaimer there.
By the way, there's a disclaimer because I don't want you to get screwed.
No, this is
for those of you that are listening on podcast. I have a disclaimer that I'm popping up on screen. It says, disclaimer: these are personal opinions and do not reflect professional associations or places of employment. Because I care.
And this isn't an opinion. Okay, so the Florida Department of Education, or Board of Education for the state of Florida, a couple of years ago, I'm going to just guess at a number. I'm going to say there were 10 members. And of those 10 members on the Board of Education, 2 of them were prior educators. The rest were lawyers and businessmen. Oh. And they were the ones that were making up policy of how teachers were to teach in the classroom and how we were going to get paid and how we were going to be evaluated.
Interesting.
And how does that make sense?
I feel like that explains a lot of the education system. It really does.
It hits it on the head.
Yeah.
Well, and I see the same thing that happens in the government as well. You have political appointees that have never spent time in any agency or whatever, and they become the head of that agency, and they don't know what they're doing.
Well, the CIA.
Here again. Wait! I got to put this up here.
I mean, has the head of the CIA ever been an intelligence officer, or has it always been a politician?
Well, actually, in some cases they have, or they have had experiences. But here again, I mean, depending on the administration, they'll put whoever they want in there. And I'm not talking about like, the secretary level. I'm talking like even to like department heads within the organization. That might not be a primary position, but a secondary or whatever. I have some examples, but I can't really talk about it right now. So, but hey, by the way, if you guys if you're watching this now, be sure to use the comments. Tell us where you're watching from us. Be sure to say hello, please. And if you have any questions, be sure to pop them in the comments. We'll be more than happy to try to give you bad answers, because that's what we do here. There's good questions and you get mediocre answers. Sometimes there's some gold nuggets in there, but you really got to dig.
I just want to say that's a really interesting point that you brought up on who's like part of the board, because what I've learned in my marketing journey is that a lot of things that we take as like common knowledge were things that were just invented because of business. One of the things that I learned about was orange juice. We think it's a healthy thing for your breakfast or whatever, but what happened was I want to say like 50 years ago, I'm not sure exactly the date, but there was a overflow of oranges and they had to figure out what to do to sell them because they weren't selling very fast. So some marketer invented a machine that you could squeeze the oranges on and create orange juice from. And that way he could sell 5 or 6 oranges per glass and, get rid of the shortage right away. So they created the idea that it is a perfect, drink for your breakfast, when in reality it's probably got too much sugar and it's not necessarily the best thing. It's healthier than some other choices, but growing up, it is so good. I'm not knocking orange juice, but growing up, I remember they'd always be like, advertisements for cereal, and there'd be a glass of orange juice, piece of toast, and the cereal or whatever, and that's part of your breakfast. But in reality, there's no like nutritional science backing up why you should have orange juice for breakfast. So thanks. But I found that really interesting.
You're rubbing it in because I'm diabetic and I can't drink orange juice, and now I crave it so much.
I had no idea. Real quick,
I'm leaving and getting orange juice.
Elkanah says hello. Hello, Elkanah. Chris Rolling says hello from Pace, Florida. And then my mom, thank you for watching, is watching from Virginia. So thank you. So what are your thoughts on, and here again, what are your thoughts on Department of Education? Or do you want to pass that?
No, I think that whether you're conservative or you're liberal, and I'm not going to express my political views,
right?
But because I believe that I'm going to speak from an educator's point of view. The vast majority of educators that I know and I speak to on a daily basis are not a fan of Ms. DeVos or her policies. They're not fans of privatizing schools or charter schools because it's taking away money that we could be pouring into our kids and funneling it off to something else that doesn't have the same standards that we do. As a public school, we have to maintain standards set by the state, by those businessmen and attorneys. Right. The private schools and charter schools don't have those same standards, but they're still going to get the tax money. And so it's not a level playing field. And that's frustrating.
Yeah.
So charter schools versus, like the administration, like the school administration, where are the biggest difference? So you're telling me that charter schools don't have the same I lost my. I'm trying to think of the word, and it's not
They
coming.
don't have the same testing standards.
Okay.
Yeah, standards.
But at the same time, are the testing standards good? I mean, because we just talked about teachers, personal perspectives or personal discretion. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, here, and I could be wrong, but let's just pretend that I'm right. My wife never corrects me. And that they don't have to take the same state tests that public school students do. So public school students are taking the
FCAT.
It's not FCAT, it's FSA, and it jumps my mind what it stands for. Florida Standards Assessment. And they start in 3rd grade taking that all the way up through 10th grade. So if public school students are taking that, and 3rd graders have to pass the reading or they're retained. Okay, so think about that. Private school students don't have that. And that's also how schools are judged. That's how teachers are judged, evaluated. That's how principals are evaluated. And that's how students are evaluated. They're evaluated by one test on one day of their life, an entire school year. And that's determining what kind of student they are. And that's ridiculous. What if I woke up and had a bad day? Parents are arguing all night, so I didn't sleep well, but I've got to get up tomorrow and take this all day long math test. And my next year placement in math, even though I've got straight A's all year, but I did poorly on this test one day. Now I'm not going to be placed in an advanced math class. I'm going to be placed in a regular or a below achieving class.
Right.
And those kind of notions are completely backwards, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's now, is it true? And here again, I don't know, but is it true? Because you hear reports of them taking, obviously funding's right. No one has enough money to do anything. That they're taking money away from like the arts and the music and
there's no doubt. They may say they're pumping more money into education. But for example, in Santa Rosa County, we have no middle school sports programs, which keep kids out of trouble.
Wow.
Right? Because they keep them occupied after school. My son's elementary school, they have no art program. So the music teacher kind of tries to incorporate art and music together.
Really?
If they did more free acting running around playing than they did music. Whereas when I was in elementary school, we had full-on music class. And I started violin in 4th grade, and
same here.
All I had was that stupid recorder from Miss Kerrigan in Baghdad Elementary School. I don't know what happened to that lady. I hope she's not. She was older than
listening to you.
Yeah, she probably is. And if you're still alive, thank you, I guess.
God bless her.
God bless you for dealing with a student like me. I remember, she was in it anyway. So and then in middle school we had Mr. Kingery who taught us woodworking. And,
right. Well, and so that there were all those electives in middle school that you rotated through.
Right.
And at my school, for 6th graders, you either are in chorus or you're in band, and that's it. There's no more woodworking. There's no shop. There's no mechanics. Auto mechanic. There's nothing. All of that is gone.
See, that's a real shame. And it's funny because even though I didn't like it at the time, but I went through home economics.
Right. And
I learned a ton of like to this day, I know how to sew because of that stupid class I took when I was 12 or however old I was. And those are life skills that that you'll use forever. And so it's kind of a shame that it's almost like as we progress, we digress, right? Because we got all this technology. I mean, shoot, I have, well, that's my wallet, but I have a ton of, for those of you that are watching or listening to this on podcast, I just brought up my phone, but it's really my wallet. My phone's in my wallet. But anyway, I'm holding up my phone and I'm saying that, we have tons of knowledge at the, at our fingertips, but as we get more, more advanced, it seems like we fall behind on a lot of other things. So I guess that levels the playing field. I don't know.
The more advanced we get, the more the basics get thrown out.
Yeah.
It comes back to when I was teaching 6th grade math. What was the first thing you did in 3rd grade? You memorized your math facts.
Right.
And so here I am in 6th grade teaching 6th grade math, and they couldn't tell me 3 times 5, And so it was basic things that have changed, basic standards that changed in education.
See, you bring up a really good, because you hear about Common Core and all like that, which I don't know much about. But the thing is like you said, you learn the basics through rote memorization. It wasn't theory. It was, no, this is what this is. And it's the same thing like, I'm just going to use this example, like martial arts. Those that are going into a martial arts form, they learn the basics until they become a black belt.
That's right.
And the thing is the black belt's not the end. That is opening the door and just beginning. And it's the same way with learning your arithmetic and your writing and your laws and your skills until you become the black belt in that area, and then that's when it really starts. Of course, I never got a yellow belt with my math, and that's why I became a Marine. And
well, I'm gonna plug this in there. Yeah. My son is a 1st degree black belt, and he's working on his 2nd degree now. And even though he only comes up to half my chest, I'm still not going to wrestle with him anymore. He only shot where it counts.
But it's true. Because it becomes muscle memory, and then once you know it, then you can build. It's like building the base or the foundation of the house that you build everything else on.
Yeah, well, and this is the way I think of it. And again, I'll go ahead and make the disclaimer. This is my opinion. And
wait! I got one ready. Here we go. There's a disclaimer. These are our personal opinions and do not reflect professional associations or places of employment.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
We still want to get paid.
So if you think about starting, I don't know, the 40s all the way through the early 90s, the United States led the world in education. The United States also led the world in everything.
Right.
Engineering, all of the sciences, business, whatever it be, the United States led it. And then Big Brother took their hand and they stuck it down in it. And when the government starts telling occupations, professionals how to do their job and what to do in their job, that's when standards really plummet. And now look at the state of where we are now.
You're right. My grandmother,
Absolutely.
I think she was born in 1912 or whatever, and she only had an 8th grade education. She's the smartest lady I know or knew. Right. Yeah, because up and then, they were teaching. Yeah, and it's funny because my wife and I were talking about this the other day. In New Orleans, it used to have some of the best, not the private schools, but the public schools were pretty good because she was telling me about her parents who grew up in the 40s and the 30s and 40s. They were learning Latin, they were learning, second languages, and now, New Orleans isn't really known for its education right now, so.
There is a certain education to be had on the street.
It's survival of the fittest for sure. But seriously, and that's an issue. And I think you are correct, is, taking the personal discretion out of your occupation. And see, that's another thing. And that's actually another thing that we could talk about is, society and how we're changing, right? Society, it takes something that we all agree on for society to work.
Right.
And for us, for the USA, it was, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. And then as we've gotten bigger, and it seems like, and I'm not trying to sound nationalistic or whatever, but in order for anything to work, an organization, an agency, it has to have things that it believes in, or it has to have like something that we can all agree on for it to work. Values. And do you see, from your position as a law enforcement officer and then also currently in school, do you see that changing dramatically from what you and I experienced growing up?
The pendulum has hit the end and it is starting to come back. I've seen the government has slowly taken their hands out of our classrooms. They're starting to do some more common, at least here in Florida. I commend
California
for what he's doing. He's really giving us more power, and he's cutting back on testing. He's taking away idiotic requirements such as, to graduate from high school, every student must complete Algebra 2. How many kids, and here's a statistic. In Santa Rosa County, one of the highest performing counties in the state of Florida. Okay, number 4 or 5, something like that. And that's truth. 30% of our high school graduates, 33% go to college.
Okay.
So there's another 70% that don't go to college.
Right.
Okay. Of that 30%, only 20 to 25% are still in college after the first year. So let's just drop it down to 75%. So 75% of our student population in Santa Rosa County, do they need to take Algebra 2 to be successful in life? No. So they are slowly removing those requirements, and they're starting to introduce more vocational skills, which kind of like the micro way of thinking, let's prepare you for a job and be successful in life, not to take classes that you're never going to use.
Right. I mean, and I'll talk about my own journey. I mean, in high school, I did not do well in math. Like, I was horrible at it. Like, it was one of those things. Well, and here again, I'm not going to name the teacher, but it was one of those things where.
Go ahead, drop the name.
No.
Drop it like it's hot.
No, not going to do that. But like I could get the answer. Like, for some reason, my brain could process the answer, but I couldn't show you how I did it.
Right.
But since I couldn't do it, and then this teacher had a certain way of doing it. Like, yeah. He had a certain formula that you had to use. It wasn't like the normal, he had this whole thing that you had to do, and if you didn't do it, he would gig you on it. And so it created this anxiety in me. So whenever I came across math, forever and ever after that, it really kind of stunted my growth in that area. But and then I didn't go to college. It took me 20 years to finish my bachelor's degree, and I did it. What's that?
That's called hard work and work ethic.
Well, and I didn't want to go in debt, so I paid a little bit. I went to school. Paid a little bit. I went to school. And it's just interesting that in this life, you can find success, even from humble beginnings. I mean, because Milton, Florida, isn't that great.
Well, here's what really piques it for me is there's a welding program at our local technical school. The high schoolers can start welding in high school.
Oh, wow.
And then 1 year after high school, there's an advanced welding class. And then, so they have 1 year after high school that they take their advanced welding. And then when they graduate from that class, they start off making $75,000, $80,000 a year.
It's not bad.
Without a college degree. So why does everybody need to go to college?
Man, I need to go get a welding. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
It's funny how sometimes you get. I mean, yeah, it's funny how sometimes you make decisions and you end up where you are, and you look back going, I've made good choices, but I've made some bad choices.
I could have made some better choices.
Yeah.
There's a young lady that I've mentored for, oh goodness, 6, 7 years now. Love her to death. She's like a member of our family now. Not the brightest book child, for like book studies.
I hope she's not watching. Yeah, go ahead and drop a name.
I love you, sweetie. She tries really hard, but she's never going to be that all A student. And she has no desire to go to college.
Right.
And that's fine. But you know what the coolest thing is? She wants to be a mechanic. Oh. And here she is. She's a junior in high school. She's already changed the oil on a car. She's already changing brakes on cars. She's already working on engines. And it's like, you know what? Think about that. A female who can go on and be a mechanic. Imagine if she could open up an auto shop and hire all ASC certified female mechanics.
Right.
I mean, everybody's got the stigma that, the wife goes out, takes the car to the shop, and they're going to be taken advantage of.
True. I mean,
they go to the all-female shop.
That's a good point.
She's got this great gig already set. I mean,
they're still going to get taken advantage of it just by a female. I'm joking. No, hopefully not. But it's interesting because we're kind of getting off topic, but when I was a young Marine and I didn't have a whole lot of money, my brakes needed fixing, and so I went to the mechanic, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's going to cost this much," and I'm like, "What?" And I went and did it myself. It took me 45 minutes, and it was a fraction of the cost. And I was like, man. Anyway, so it's just, and that is the beauty of having YouTube, right? I mean, I fixed so many things.
Yes.
I've tore up a lot of things too, but I fixed some things, so it's not even, So if you were king for the day, what would you do? Like in regards to society, the problems that you see, what would you do to fix them?
Well, you just opened up Pandora's box.
I know.
I mean, where do you want me to start? I mean, okay, so, seriously, you've opened it. I think that, okay, I'm going to tell you where I stand politically, okay? I'm very neutral.
Yes.
Where it comes on things. I'm neither far right nor far left on anything.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there are a lot of people in jail that don't need to be in jail because of mental illness.
Right.
And if law enforcement was able to be trained more in, I don't say psychiatry, but recognizing mental illness versus someone who is truly criminal, I think we'd have less people in jail. I think if the court system took that more into account and instead of sticking them in jail, we stuck them in a mental health facility. And the same is true in people out there are going to hate me for this and call me some Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but there are a lot of people that are locked up for a long time because of drugs that I think that, addiction, I'm not talking about dealers, but I'm talking about people that, are users that are addicted, and addiction is a mental illness. Mm-hmm. And sticking them in prison for 20 years for smoking crack isn't going to do them any good. It's not doing society any good.
Right.
And I think it's, it's a situation that has to be solved by society. That has we have to focus more on, helping and rehabilitation instead of punishment.
See, you bring up a good point now, and I wanted to reiterate, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, is what is the end game, right? And I think for a lot of law enforcement or society in general is we start off with a wrong thing. Okay, so in business, when you start a business, you start with the end in mind, right? You start with what you want to get out of it. And I think that a lot of times with our law enforcement or our different communities, we want, instead of kind of going back to that warrior mentality versus the guardian mentality, right? We want to, instead of, fix the problem, or, hey, look at the bigger picture, because like you said, there's some, if I came as a law enforcement officer, if I came across someone and I knew they couldn't afford it, like I just know if I do this, they're going to get they're not going to afford it. What's that?
They're going to get hammered.
They're going to get hammered, and then it's going to, they're going to have more problems down the line where you have personal, when you have personal discretion, you can be, okay, hey, listen. Now, if they're a jerk, yeah, you did this to yourself, buddy. But here again, that kind of comes back to, because, obviously as law enforcement has changed, people are afraid to let anybody off the hook because of ramifications of what happens if they let them go. Have you seen that?
And also everybody's filming you.
Right.
So you're going to be criticized for doing what's right and for doing what's wrong.
Right. Yeah. So that's tough, man. I mean, it's a tough conversation.
Yeah.
So then if you applied that thought train to education, if I saw a student that, let's say in 8th grade, that I knew was not going to be successful in the current educational setting, why can't we go ahead and steer those children onto a vocational track and get them ready for life instead of, taking classes that will be meaningless for them for the rest of their life? If they are truly, and I'm not talking down to anyone, but if we know they aren't going to go on to be a rocket scientist because they're failing, 8th grade math straight after they're trying their hardest, why can't we steer them into a profession where, set them up for good in life instead of failure?
Well, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, kind of, that whole Mike Rowe thing about trade schools. I mean, shoot, I know plenty of people that make really good money, as plumbers, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's another thing that we need to get away from is treating those classes or that. I mean, because I remember when I was growing up, people, we would look at certain things in school and we're like, oh, those are all the stupid kids.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, we did it. We stereotyped.
Yeah, and and now some of them are probably doing better than I am.
There's no doubt. A lot of them are doing a lot better than I am. Yeah. With my master's degree, making $35,000.
Oh man! So now you're wanting to become a principal?
That's my hope. Fire truck going down my street. Sorry. That's my end goal. So I've got my master's. My principal called me. I was working at a high school last year, and he called me towards the end of the year and asked me to come back to the middle school, hoping to move me in because our assistant principal is supposed to retire this year. And hopefully, but it is a small county, so.
Well, remember, folks, if you're watching this, be sure to ask some questions. But I think we're about time to move on to the next topic that we're going to discuss. But first, before we do that, let's talk about this day in history. So this is something that I kind of wanted to implement with our show is on this day in history. Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space. Back in, of course, obviously when I do this, it does 1958. No, I'm wrong. Oh, shoot.
I've got one for you.
February 5th, 1971. Yes.
Okay. Do you know the origin of Cinco de Mayo?
Yes, I do. Because that's next on my list.
Okay. Well, I will step back. I apologize.
Cinco de Mayo is not Mexican Independence Day. Contrary to popular belief. It is actually the outnumbered Mexican army defeats the French at the Battle of Puebla. Nope. And there's a Geico commercial that just popped up.
And more Americans actually celebrate Cinco de Mayo than Mexicans.
Isn't that funny?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Hey, anytime there's
drinking
St. Patty's Day,
exactly.
Whatever I can do to.
I like seriously, all I can remember is more Americans seriously are always so pumped about Cinco de Mayo than like most other holidays. It blows my mind.
On this day in 1877, Sitting Bull leads his people into Canada. Okay, that's all I'm going to cover on that. All right.
I don't have anybody in Canada listening, so we're good.
Yeah, I know. I don't have anybody in, anyway. So let's talk about cemeteries. So growing up, and I'm glad that you're on here, Jamie, because you alluded to something that I had no idea about. Growing up in the area that we grew up in the Panhandle, Florida, there was this cemetery called Coon Hill. And I always thought that was a strange name. And, there's always it was haunted, right? They have this small, wall that it's made of concrete and it comes up to your waist high and it goes all the way around the cemetery. And apparently, as the old story goes, is you can't make it all the way around walking on it. Something will push you off. Now, I never went there in high school because I wasn't cool enough. But
scared.
I was.
It's okay.
So I did. Hey, it happens. But what do you know about that?
Okay, so I did some research. Coon Hill is actually the oldest cemetery in northwest Santa Rosa County.
And Justin says this: Coon Hill was the spot for a little while.
Yeah. So the residence, it used to be, it was on the border of Santa Rosa and Escambia County, just off the Escambia County River. And when the residents ventured that far north, that's where they resided, and they had to vote to decide if they were going to name it Possum Hill or Coon Hill. And they chose Coon Hill instead of Possum Hill. It dates, I think the oldest grave is from 1820, and the most recent is from the early 1900s. I've never walked around, but I have heard that same story that you will get pushed off. There are senators buried there. There are preachers buried there. There are a list of.
Yeah, I mean, actually, there's quite a few prestigious people that are buried there. I mean, like you alluded to, there's also the postmasters that were buried there, and I was actually kind of surprised because it's out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's like in the middle of nowhere. I've actually, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went up there a few times just to kind of check it out, just to see what it was all about, and it's kind of funny because when you go up to it, in large metal title across the entry is like Coon Hill. It almost looks like Boot Hill, right? You think of some Western like Boot Hill, but no, it's Coon Hill. Oh, Celinda says she spent many a night at Coon Hill. What were you doing, Celinda?
Celinda, why in the world were you spending the night there?
She says it was scary. Well, she's braver than both of you and I. So Celinda, did anything ever happen while you were out there? I got something strange that happened to me, and while we wait for her to respond, there's a. Okay, so for those of you that are listening to this on podcast in the future, Celinda told me to shut up, and I probably should. But while we wait for her to tell us about some of her stories, there's a small cemetery in southern Illinois, and this happened back probably 2011, 12 timeframe, and it's called the Bolton Trammell Cemetery. It's a small cemetery in the middle of nowhere near Stone Fort, Illinois, and that's where my extended family, that whole area, like my mom was a 13th child, so they have a lot of family in that area. So this is like a mile down from my aunt's home on the way to the small town of Stone Fort. So every time I would go to Illinois during the summers, we would walk a mile from her house to the town, and there was a cemetery. So that's just become just a ritual or just something I do. Like every time I go to southern Illinois, I walk to that town and I stop off in the cemetery. Well, one night, my brother and I, went to go visit my family again. And we're like, well, hey, let's walk down to the cemetery. And my wife came with me, and his wife walked with him. And we walked down there. Now, Southern Illinois has its own version of Bigfoot. It's called the Big Muddy Monster. And the reason why they call it the Big Muddy is because Mississippi. The Mississippi River meets there. The Ohio River meets right there. And there's a lot of swamps in the area. And I always heard that Bigfoot smells disgusting. Like it smells like a wet dog, really not putrid, but just very, very strong. And this cemetery has a horseshoe well that goes from, so it's a small country lane. It's a horseshoe gravel road that starts on one end. It comes in, it goes around, and meets on the other side. And so that's what we do. We just walk the perimeter and then walk back to our aunt's house. Well, while we were out there, we were near the woods, and I heard something walking in the woods. Now, this is after my time in the Border Patrol. I chase people. I'm the scary guy in the woods chasing people. So I'm used to being out at night. I'm used to, all sorts of things. So I wasn't scared, but I heard something in the woods. And so when I moved, it would move. And when I stopped, it would stop. and I got the whiff of the strongest scent of a wet dog I have ever smelled in my life. And it was just so strange because when I moved, like it was just, and I'm like, okay, it's time to go. So, but I wasn't able to smell it. What's that?
Was it a quick run home?
No. I did change. I was gonna say, well, I did change my shorts, but no. But it was strange. It was really weird because, like I said, it was, and it's funny because the power of suggestion or the power of thoughts, right? Whenever you think something's weird, then all of a sudden your imagination runs away. It was probably not. I'm sure it was nothing, but I could have come across the big muddy monster at the Bolton Trammell Cemetery in the middle of nowhere, Southern Illinois, and that was my story, and that was pretty interesting to me. I thought that was.
Please write a children's book.
I need to. The Big Muddy Monster. So Celinda went out with a ghost hunter group and had several weird things happen. You got to elaborate, Celinda. We'll have to have you on the show so you can explain this. Actually, well, it's too late now. If I thought about it, I would have a link ready to go so you could just pop in. So Jamie, do you have any, or Tim, do you have any crazy or weird stories of macabre?
Nothing that's happened to me personally. My city has a lot of ghost stories. There's been books that have been written. We have a lot of old casinos here, and people say that at night they like the wind, the chandeliers will shake and one of the roulette wheels will go around. But and I think they actually had Ghost Hunters, a TV show, come to my town, and they did an episode on it, and they were able to confirm that there was definite paranormal activity coming from one of those casinos. But I wish I had a more interesting story about me personally, but I don't. I'm a pretty boring person.
Yeah, I don't have any. I mean, I've seen some weird ones. An area that I hunt in is the Apalachicola National Forest, which runs from, I don't know, it's 800,000 acres south of Tallahassee over towards Panama City. And right smack out in the middle of it is a cemetery, right out in the middle of the woods. It's got a fence around it, kind of like Coon Hill. And if you don't know about it, there's no finding it. And most of it's Civil War era, Confederate area graves. Era. And then I think the coolest cemetery I've been to was in Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and they had there was a marker for somebody that got off came across on the Mayflower, and then they have a headstone for the guy known as the hanging judge during the witch trials. He was the one that hung everybody that was accused of being a witch. But they have to replace his marker every few years because people come knock it down because they hate him. So the city pays to have it re-erected every 3 or 4 years.
So Celinda says orbs and voices. That's what she heard. And then she also says hi.
Hi, Celinda. I miss you.
Oh, by the way, Celinda, I did send you a link through your PM on Facebook. It might bring you onto the show. So if you click on it and you want to come explain your orbs and voices, we'll see if that happens. Because actually, if you would, that would be kind of cool because I would like to see if this actually works. But no big deal if you don't. All right. And then no pressure. Yeah. Last minute, come on the show and talk with people that you don't know. Or,
the country.
Yeah. So, So that's interesting about Coon Hill, though. And like I said, I mean, it's part of the local lore, and I didn't really know that much about it until I did a little bit of research, and then you're telling me a little bit about it. Now, I guess, well, with the advent of technology and all like that, I guess they have it's by appointment only. You can't go out there anymore. I guess it's locked off, or which I don't know.
You have to walk like a mile to get to it because they've gated it off to keep the kids out.
Right. Well, even back in 2005 or 6, when I went out there, you still had to park quite a ways away, and I would walk out there, and I went out there twice just to kind of see it. But both times when I went out there, I got to say it was I was armed because it was.
I don't go anywhere where I'm not armed. Except
yeah, I have 2 of them, But it was one of those things where it was like, okay, it was and here again, you don't know if it's one of those things where it's like, power suggestion or whatever, but you felt like you were being watched out there, but it could just be nothing,
No,
Of course, it could be the hills have eyes, and there's people out there waiting for us to show up.
The coons have eyes.
Yeah, the coon has the large trees have eyes, but anyway. Well, all right, we have been talking. So is there anybody, Slenda, I'm going to give you one more chance to hop on here if you're still here. But other than that, does anybody have any questions or any save rounds that they would like to pop on here and ask? Because remember, this show is your show, and we would like to answer questions as best as we can, but they're probably going to be bad answers, and we're okay with that. Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to bring Jamie on, because I know that he would give better answers than I can. So
it's my life. It's my job as a middle school employee. I give life advice all day, every day.
You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do that, and then I forgot to actually utilize the tinfoil hats.
I love your hat.
All right, so at least we have the gag of tinfoil hats while we were talking about the cemeteries.
I feel safe now.
Well, good.
It has a nice fit.
I like it.
It's kind of like a nod to the British during the World War I. They had the rim that went all the way around.
Yeah, kind of. I can see that. Mine's falling apart. Yeah. I need to fix it. All right. Well, I guess we are coming to a close. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
I appreciate you having me on. I had a good time.
It was awesome having you on.
Thank you.
Yeah. No,
thank you for sharing your knowledge, and you had a lot of great stories. I think you had a lot of good points that it was a good perspective to hear from. Seriously.
No, I'm glad that you had the time, and I'm glad that you came and spent some time with us. And who knows, when you're a principal, we may bring you back, because we always enjoy a good conversation, and you brought it. You brought it, man.
As long as if that point comes, we have to block out anything from Santa Rosa County from joining the conversation.
Of course. Yeah. Of course, sadly, that's pretty much everybody that watches the show. But I do have to say this for those that are watching now, and we are on podcast. So what I do is, obviously, those that are watching this now, or those that are listening to this or watching this on YouTube or the podcast, we do Facebook Lives Tuesday evenings on the Facebook /Good Questions, Bad Answers. So you can come join our show and ask questions in real time, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. But you can also catch us on YouTube at our channel there, or you can go on podcasts, and we're pretty much on all the major platforms. I think there's 8 of them, but you can listen to us there. And if you have a question or comment or a topic, because we're always looking for good topics or questions to do our shows around. And like I said, this show is your show, and we can't do it without you. I mean, we can, but it's much better if you join us. And you can email your topics and questions to Good Questions, Bad Answers. And James, see, I know you as James. Me and you go back to the James era.
Well, see, my parents always called me Jamie, but that was the girl name in school.
Right.
And so, no, I was James in school. When I got to college, I was like, it's just too confusing anymore. I'm just going to go by Jamie, so I'm not made fun of when people meet my parents.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, multiple name, Jamie, James. No, seriously though, I'm glad that you were with us, and thank you for being here. And everybody else, thank you for spending your time with us, and we will see y'all next week. Take care. God bless.
Thanks, guys.